Hello and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be another CarMiZa video, trunk details part 36, slowly but surely. I wanted to capture this real quick for those who have not seen this stuff. I had some buddies come over this past weekend, Jim, David, and Jose. It was awesome having you guys. Appreciate you coming by and chatting about the car and catching up. I took a bunch of stuff out to show these guys. Most of this is all the magazines that the car was in, that Miza was in. This is just a fraction of them. I also have, and someday I'll get around to uploading these things, probably over 1,000 photos of the past builds of the car. So if you're not familiar, this car is a legendary car audio system that was once owned by Earl Zalsmer. There's Earl on the cover of a magazine. There were several of those. And I am rebuilding the car. So as you can see, I also have I put the trunk kind of back together for those guys to be able to see. This is a work in progress, so there's still a lot of work to do, but you can get an idea what it's going to look like. It also features an iPad in the trunk lid, which is playing the last video that I posted. This car also, from a sound quality perspective, was absolutely incredible. Featured 13-inch woofers in the kick panel, which I am rebuilding and reinstalling in there. And if I go around to this side, you'll be able to see the back side of the woofer. And there's going to be a bunch of work done to the fender so that it will motorize open and you'll be able to see the back of the woofer. So let's go ahead and get started in this video. One other quick thing I want to show. These are the original mid-range speakers that came out of this car. And if you're familiar with it, these were the ones that motorized out of the dash. These are the actual drivers themselves. These are Bowers & Wilkins mid-range. Thanks again for Esteban, you know who you are, for hooking me up with these. This is the new version, well, newer, same exact drivers. These were cut down. These have not been cut yet. I will be doing some milling on the drivers, but you can see the difference in the Kevlar because they brown over age. These are brand new, were barely been taken out of the box. Also, this is the tweeter I'm using, which is a Bowers & Wilkins silver signature. There'll be a pair of these that go coaxially in front of the tweeter, or excuse me, in front of the mid, just as Earl had it. All right, so this video is not going to be incredibly impactful in terms of what I'm going to be building and some big cool thing to show you at the end. It's going to look just like it does now, actually. With a few exceptions. So the main emphasis on this video is going to be to, hopefully, I'm not going to pigeonhole myself and lie to you again, but I want to try to get all the wiring done. I got to get the wiring into the gas lines, finish off the wiring from that point, you know, through the rest of the car, down into the rear seat area, and then finish wiring up everything in the trunk lid. And then there's a whole bunch of tweaks that I want to make as I go through. There's probably 20 little things I don't like. I'm going to clean them all up. The other big thing is that I need to open this hole up. And this isn't, I didn't screw up here or anything. This is because I added the gas line. This is the gas line here. You can see it going right in there. And I need to widen this to provide more clearance. So I'll probably just go straight down here, about 1/4 or 5/16, and that's going to give me plenty of clearance for that. So the first step is going to be to take everything out. And if you're new to the channel, I kind of name things, that way I can reference them in my to-do list and things like that. So there is what I call the Milbert floor. Those are Milbert tube amplifiers. I'm going to basically pull all of that out. And then from there, it'll be pulling all of the hanging rack items, which is a ton of work because you can see the little wings I've made up there. These side panels come out, the shock tower covers, the wings, the Zapco amps, the changers, all of this has got to come out. And it's all bolted in with machined hardware. So it takes a bit of time. So onward and upward we go. Milbert floor removed. Quick sneak peek here. If you haven't seen these before, some of my earliest videos is where I did some of this work, and they have like super low view count. So I think a lot of people may not have seen this. These were the original bus bars that Henry made. This is a Streetwires block, but Henry fabricated all of this. And then I fabricated these brackets to hold the capacitors. So it's just 1-inch aluminum bus bar, that I built a jig for. I heated up the aluminum and bent it, and that's what holds the capacitors in place. Just realized too, a lot of you newer folks into car audio may not really know what these are. They're giant 1 farad capacitors, which we used to use to act as a kind of a reservoir for current, which helped out the bass performance of the car. I don't even know if people are doing it these days. Some of you may say, oh, those aren't necessary or whatever. They were in the original build. These are actually the original ones. I will test them to make sure things like the ESR are all proper and they're up to snuff. But I wouldn't think of not using these because they were part of the original build, and that's, again, what I'm trying to maintain. All right, now for the fun part, I'm going to remove all the rest of this. The build is quite serviceable, but because there's a bunch of machined hardware, it's not super quick. But here we go. Wish me luck. All right, decided not to do the whole thing just yet because I've got to kind of very carefully think about how I want to do these. Normally what I do is remove one strut, and then I can remove the strut inside the shock tower cover and get that out, and then put the strut back and then do the same thing on the other side. I'll probably do that. It makes it easier to get the Zapco, I think I call it the Zapco 1000. So this is 2 Z600s. And then I had a spare chassis that I sliced 2-inch chunks out of, creating an end cap, a center cap, and another end cap. And again, for those of you who are new to my channel into this build, here's what I did. I had bus bars basically welded in. This is 1/4 inch by 1 inch aluminum plate bus bars that I had welded in, and then I tapped and created threads for my brackets, or in the brackets basically, and the amps are gutted right now. There's no boards in there yet, so everything's just hollow. So over here, the Sony stuff, as you saw, hangs off of this. So here's the way I did this. I made aluminum plates, and then these brackets hold the equipment in. These also are mock-up changers. They are hollow right now. They're not going to be they're the final model, but not the final actual changers. I have a pair that are brand new, never been installed. These are also gutted just to make it light for mock-up. But you can see where the hardware goes in for this. Notice I even like beveled this edge. The amount of detail in this build is pretty substantial. I also made sure that when I do this, you can see I used like a furniture style bolt here. There's plenty of room with the suspension in the changer, so that won't be an issue. And I figure 6 1/4 inch bolts should be plenty to hold each changer. So did the same thing, excuse me, on the P1 and X1 Sony processor. If you're familiar with these normally have like a base, like a kind of legs. I did a lot of milling work on this aluminum. I cut the legs off, and then I created this filler piece, and I built cleats inside of the housing to make sure that this was strong enough. So all of this is machined hardware. This will all be gold plated. The changers will stay their original color. But once this is all in, I think it's going to look pretty sharp. And you can see I use a router to router this edge. This again is, I took the bottom and made it the top and just flipped them over. And therefore I get a nice cool little sandwich there. So kind of a unique look. That's the way Earl had it. They used a jigsaw. They didn't use a router. And then I came up with the idea of doing this filler plate as well. So, all right, continuing on. All right, decided the next thing I'm going to do is pull off the trunk lid cover and the panels. You'll see where I use a little hook tool. I added a little teeny tiny hole right there, which will not be visible once it's all upholstered. And that allows me to get a hook tool in there and pull these panels out. You'll see the magnets, and then I'll pull the screws out and get that panel off. I'm trying to figure out, my daughter and her boyfriend should be home, I believe, shortly, and they can give me a hand pulling the trunk lid itself, because I think I've determined that I've got to pull the trunk lid at this point to be able to get the hanging shelf, hanging rack down, just because it's too tight. So That's what I'll do. I might knock out the amplifier as well and get that out. All right, and there's the iPad panel, trunk lid panel, whatever you want to call it, removed. If you've been following along, you know that I did magnets here. These, again, are just going to be some display panels, and then the iPad in the center. Everything is held in with neo magnets. And also here you can see the trunk bar detail. This is also something I did in a recent video, which is the fuel line. This is the fuel line that we welded. My son-in-law James welded to the trunk bars, and this is what will feed the wiring, which is one of the big things I'll be doing in this video. So got it on both sides. So all right, on to the next part. All right, next thing I'm going to do is pull out the Zapco stuff. This part kind of sucks because there are bolts that go through the amplifier and into the rear deck. There are a ton of them, just because of the way it built this. Later, these bolts will be converted to studs that'll be welded to the amplifier, so this will be a lot easier should I need to service it. So here we go. That was a good time. If you notice, I was kind of fighting the second amp on the way out. The Dynamat, these holes are exactly the same size. Everything is very, very precision lined up. So the holes are exactly the same size as the bolts, and there's no tolerance. There's no room for error. And the Dynamat, if you notice, was kind of sticking in there. So I'll go in with a punch and I'll cut away the Dynamat around those areas just to make sure it doesn't stick. I want to show one other detail too. So and imagine, here's the bottom of the amplifiers. These also are media blasted, so they're not painted or anodized yet. That'll come a little bit later. But this, I just wanted to show some detail for those of you who may not have seen this. Those are the pieces of flat bar that I had welded in, that I drilled and tapped. And then this is that Sony piece upside down, right? So as if it's hanging for the rear deck. And then that's how that goes. Same thing there. And then the changers go here, and they've got a mate kind of a piece there. So there's 2 bolts per side. So just wanted to show that detail. Again, this stuff, you don't even really notice it. And there's a ton of work. Machined this plate as well for the end cap. And that's going to hide all of the wiring and controls. Okay, and that's what this area looks like with the amplifier out. Anything that is flat is made of 1/8" aluminum. Even the parts that are curved there, those what I call shock tower covers, are made of 1/8" aluminum, which is very solid, but a lot of work, right? All the machine hardware, everything was cut with a router, so a lot of work. If you have not yet and you want to get caught up, there's plenty of videos on the channel that go through all that detail. So I think the next thing is going to be pulling the trunk lid. I'm waiting for my daughter's boyfriend to get here, and he's going to give me a hand. Okay, trunk lid off, making progress. Next thing is going to be probably the trunk arms. That's going to be, it's chicken or the egg, but I'm thinking trunk arms. All right, it's a couple of nights later. Had a busy last night and a crazy busy work day today, but it is Thursday evening. I have tomorrow off and I've got the full weekend. So I plan on getting quite a bit done on the car. So without further ado, I think I'm going to try to time-lapse the rest of the removal of all of these parts. Piece of cake. A little bit of Dynamat residual there. This piece up top, the hanging rack, and that piece are effectively permanent. Once I put them in for their last time, the carpet is going to go over that. I'll upholster those all in the car and all as one piece of carpet. And those won't ever come back out. There'll be holes where the wiring goes through the rear deck for some different wiring, but those are kind of permanent. You might be also thinking, well, why didn't you just cut the panel to make room for the trunk arms with the thing in place and get like a cutoff wheel or something like that in there? I certainly could have done that, but it would have been pretty messy. I'd rather take it apart and do it right. So at this point, I can do the cuts on the hanging rack. Okay, so the hanging rack is definitely messy on the underside. That's where all the Dynamat was sticking on the rear deck, which again, I'm not too worried about. I'm not worried at all about. That's the actual side that the amplifiers mount to. So this goes up in there. I Dynamatted everything, so you're getting some residual, which is fine. So I've got this laid out. I decided to go 3/8 of an inch wider, which would be plenty. I'll go ahead and cut this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this and film this because it's getting pretty dark out. So let me go ahead and get this done. Okay, I cut one side with a jigsaw, and my intent was to come behind with a router and with a flush trim bit and clean it up. It's really tough to see because it's dark out. The cut is like very accurate. The whole thing's going to be carpeted. So I think I'm kind of splitting hairs here. I think we'll be okay. So I'll go ahead and cut the other one and I'll bring you along for the ride. Hopefully it looks okay with the bad lighting I got out here. All right, if you missed my earlier videos, this is 1/8 inch aluminum, which is a little tricky to cut. So I've got a Diablo metal cutting blade, so a good quality blade, but a really cheap. This thing's like 30 bucks. Scale saw, variable speed down to speed 2, so it's nice and slow. I also spray the blade with WD-40 and just go really slow and take my time. So let's go ahead and get this cut. All right, I just realized how sketchy the lighting is out here. So I'm just gonna do a little bit just to give you an idea and just spraying the blade. I've got the piece clamped just to make sure it doesn't move on me. And here we go. That's pretty much it. It cuts really nice with the right setup. Quick pro tip, if you're going to use your jigsaw to cut aluminum or your router, blow it off really good just to get metal filings out of there in case you cut some kind of fine wood after that. You don't want to scratch it up. And I also wipe everything down with some rubbing alcohol just to get the residual WD-40 off the saw. Okay, hanging rack mod's complete. Opened up those holes, and now it's time to reinstall it. All right, so at this point I installed what I call the wings to the hanging rack. Those are the side pockets that basically cover up that area. I'm going to try to install this with those attached. I don't know if I've done this in the past. If not, I may have to take one side off. I also pulled off the trunk gasket to make sure I don't tear that with this piece going in. It is not impossible to get to the hardware once the main piece is up there, but it is a little tricky, so hopefully this goes well. All right, hanging rack is back in. Everything went great. I was not able to do both wings on the hanging rack and get it in the car. It simply wouldn't fit. It's just too wide. So I removed one, put it in the car, and then added the second one, and it went pretty smooth. So I've also taken the trunk arms and just kind of held them up there just to make sure, triple check to make sure that the clearance is good, and it is indeed very good. So from here, I'll go to the next part of the reassembly. All right, I decided to do the shock tower covers next, and from here, I'll do the Zapco 1000. The Zapco 1000 in place, time for the Sony parts. And the Sony equipment is installed. I've got to say, putting all of this stuff back in, everything lines up exactly the way it should. For example, the bolt holes in the rear deck for the hanging rack are exactly the same size of the bolt. I intentionally did it where there's not a lot of slop or play, and everything lines up really nice. So This is a ton of work, a ton of time. I'm over 1,000 hours in the trunk, but I'm liking the results. So, all right, on to the next part. All right, I'm going to wrap up here for the night. It's like after 10 o'clock. So I just put the Milbert floor in there, just mainly to protect it. I don't want to like step on it or have anything happen to it. And then I've got just things kind of back together. This is mounted, the iPad panel, even though the arms aren't in there. Got the Milberts on the bench. And I've got the trunk arms on the bench. Either going to run the wires in these tomorrow, first thing, or I'm going to work on kind of the miscellaneous tweaks. That's mainly fitment. Like for some reason, the side panels, the gap is not correct. I'm off by like a 16th. Something's going on there. I've got to figure out what's going on. It's not going to be a big deal. I'm sure I can get it back, but that's something that's been bothering me. So with that, I'll wrap it up for the evening, and I will see you tomorrow. Okay, it is Friday, the next day, and while I had my coffee this morning, I went through and figured out a plan of attack here to get this from where we're at right now to kind of the wiring complete and all the loose ends in the trunk currently. So again, I'm off today, which is great. I took the day off and I'm going to go pretty hot and heavy, I think, here on CarMiZa today. So the first step is to prep these wires to get them into the tube. So it's going to be some work. I get that. I know it's going to be a challenge, but I've got a plan. So basically what I'm going to do first is clean the wires, and then I'll use some 3M electrical tape because it's really thin to tape them together. Okay, so I got all the wires cleaned up. I also kind of straightened them by doing that as well. I started to tape these up, and I think I'm going to go with a different plan. I just kind of put this into the tube, and I think it's going to get hung up even with this tape. What I'm going to try is just take the whole bundle without tape. I've got some silicone spray, silicone the tube, and just try to slide it through there. Let's see how it goes. All right. I got good news and I got bad news. You guys know I'm a straight shooter, so everything about this build, even the things that maybe other people would hide. So here's the deal. The good news is I got the wires through. If I was to pull on these, they're slack, they move freely, everything's fine. Bad news is 2 of the wires wouldn't fit. These are the 2 largest gauge wires from the factory wiring, and this is the white and the blue. So what I did is ran them through the passenger side. I'll extend these by a couple of feet, run them over the rear deck, and I'll be fine. These 3 wires I have added, these are going to be used for my ground, a charging cable for the iPad, and also for the lighting. So these also now, mine are a 16 gauge, so they're pretty heavy duty. And these also, if I was to pull on them, they pull fine. There's good slack. So that was going to be the plan all along if I ran into an issue with the wires being too fat on this side, which is definitely the case. So no problem. I'm totally fine with it. Next thing I'm going to do is a test, and I'll show you what I'll do. Not that I suspect any problems whatsoever. I am very confident. If you recall, if you've been watching the series, when James did the welding, I was concerned about, did he go through the wall of the fuel line? If he did, it would have been impossible to get the wires through at all. So I'm very confident there's no problem at all, and I'm very confident none of the wires are chafed. Another good reason why I did the flare at the end. But just to be 1,000% safe, I'll strip the wires back. I'm going to test continuity between each wire individually and the other wires, and also the trunk bar itself, just to make sure. I've got an area here where when I put the bolt on, the paint kind of came off, which is totally fine. This was just a quick coat of primer. But this way I can make sure that there's no problems with the wiring and everything is good. Okay, the continuity test, as suspected, was a success, no issues whatsoever. So the next step is to move on to adding plugs to each of the wiring harnesses. To do this, I'm using these Deutsch connectors, which is German for German. And shout out to Mark at Car Audio Fabrication. If you're not familiar, the guy's got a young man. He's got an awesome YouTube channel, super knowledgeable in 12 volt, and he recommended this whole kit. So basically, I've got the kit here, and I just realized too that I'm gonna have to double up on this kit because there's only one of each type of connector. So I ordered a new one, and the second one will be here tomorrow. I won't need it till then anyway. I've got his suggested crimpers, and these are gonna do a center crimp. If you look in there, it's actually pretty cool. As you crimp down, they do a 4-way crimp, so pretty cool there. I also ordered these brackets, which I believe will work with these connectors, although they're a different brand. I believe they will, and then these will come in handy when I go to actually mount the harnesses themselves. And then finally, he's got a pick tool, basically like this tool here, which allows you to remove the pins from the socket. So we're going to crimp the pins, and then you assemble this whole kit, and then you end up with a really nice proper connector. But should you need to repin it, this tool will allow you to do so. So I'm going to actually do a little bit of research here. He shows on his YouTube channel how to set this up, and I'm going to follow his instructions and get to work on this. All right, quick thing here. If you're doing these and you go to use this bracket, when I initially grabbed this bracket, I said, all right, this is cool, but it doesn't work. It doesn't lock into place. And as you can see, it does not if it goes that way. The bracket goes the other way, like that, and it will click into place. You can see it's got a little ridge there, which goes over that little bump. Also, shout out to my buddy Jason. He's actually the one that turned me onto these connectors, and for that, I'm grateful. So I think these are definitely going to be the right solution. They're not super cheap, and it's a decent amount of work, but it's going to give me a nice proper connection at both the trunk lid and also at the car section. Okay, I'm not going to cover every inch of this just because there's some good online tutorials, but like Mark's video, there's a couple of others that I found on these George connectors, but a couple of things to be aware of. There is a female plug, which is the larger one, and then the male plug. The female plug uses male pins, and the male plug uses female pins. Also, you want to be cognizant of, if you're going to use the bracket, where's the bracket going to go, and therefore the bracket goes on the female plug. So you want to consider that, and then that way you know where to put this. The beauty of these whole things, you crimp the crimper, the end here, the terminal, onto the wire, and then it's completely interchangeable and rebuildable. You could literally swap your male and female ends if you wanted to later after the fact, which really is a great feature of these. Also, you'll notice on your pin that you will put in, there's a little tiny sight hole, and you can make sure that you're in far enough with your wire prior to crimping it. Also, these are the crimpers that I got. Again, these are the ones that Mark suggested. They are adjustable, which is kind of a fine-tune adjustment to how much of a crimp they do. I'm using 16 gauge wires, the largest, and then down to probably the factory wires are about a 20 gauge, 22 gauge on some of the real thin stuff on the other trunk arm. So I'll let you know if I make any adjustments there. And again, I am waiting on the other package to come tomorrow. So my objective is to get the plugs taken care of on the trunk lid side, which is this side. And then unfortunately not until Sunday, which is fine, I'll get it done Sunday, will I be able to finish the car side. I did also order some tan heat shrink and tan loom that I'm going to be using. You really won't see it, but if anybody ever looks way up underneath there, I want to be able to hide that, and I didn't want to use a black loom, so I ordered that as well. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and get crimping, and I'll show you how this works in just a moment. Okay, got these crimped. So far, very impressed with the quality and the engineering going on here. You get a 4-way crimp on this, which really offers up a great connection. So at this point, from what I understand, you take these pins and push them through this orange insulator. It's kind of a water gasket, if you will. Also, these plugs are numbered. So if you, I believe once you get to a certain, the numbers are tiny though. Yeah, this one's numbered. So for this one, I've got 5 wires. I'm going to use a 6-pin connector. And then I'll also draw a diagram, basically just list out 1 through 6 and which my colors are. That way I'll maintain everything and make sure it all lines up properly on both ends. So once you push these in, they're gonna, let's see, let's give it a shot. You basically push this in from what I'm told, and you're probably barely seeing this, but the connector comes in and it clicks into place. Man, I'll tell you, these things are really, the quality is phenomenal. You can tell it's definitely German engineering, I think. So you do that for all of them, and then this little cap goes in, locks into place, and this will keep the pins from pulling out. And again, should you need to make any adjustments, definitely recommend getting this tool. You don't want to put this all together and then realize you have an error and then not have this tool and then kind of have to wait for Amazon. So, all right, I'll continue on. Okay, first one done, piece of cake, and this little orange plug again just clicks into place. That also holds this water gasket, water seal in place as well. But I gotta say, man, I can't remember the last time I was this impressed by a product. Just super well thought through. And again, the fact that you can dissect them and add on or change plugs or do whatever you want, super cool. So, all right, I'm going to do the same thing to the other side, which contains all of the OEM wires. And then once that's done, we'll move to the trunk lid itself. Okay, another little pro tip I just thought of as I'm going, and I didn't hear anyone mention this. In this case, where I have 12 wires, you want to be careful to plug these in such that they don't become all twisted and gnarled up. Doesn't really matter where I put them at this point, so long as they mate on the opposite side. So again, I'm prepared to write down what color wire goes into which hole. For anyone really paying attention, you may have noticed that there are some wires in this harness that are the same color. BMW does this in this car. I ran into this. I rewired the entire car. And this, I've got 4 of the same color. My guess is that's power for the parking lights, for the 4 parking lights. So just wanted to point that out. All right, both plugs on. I am a complete Deutsch plug fanboy. big fan. Awesome connectors. Again, I went through and inventoried each of the wires so I know where they are. Notice again where I don't have any twists because I was careful as to where I plugged in each of the pins. And I've got both sides ready to go. So at this point, I'm going to go to the next part, and I'm going to look at my list, and I might kind of shift gears and do a couple of other things in the trunk and take a pause from wiring. So let me take a look at my list, and I'll let you know. Okay, I decided the next thing I'm going to do is all of the OEM trunk wiring that comes into the trunk, and this is mainly just cleaning things up and running it. I may need to extend the loom because of the side panels, but I'll kind of dig into it and check and see what I've got. I'll pull out that shock tower cover. It's possible to get it out even with the Zapco amp in place. I'll pull the floor, pull the wiring through, and just kind of assess everything and figure it out. Okay, I lied. I had to take off the end cap for the Zapco, and to get to that, I had to take the changer off. So now I've got a nice open spot. You can see that's the factory hole right there, where the factory wiring comes in. Here is the factory wiring loom in question. And as you can see, this is still pretty dirty, needs to be all retaped. And then this goes into the main fuse box right here. So first order of ops is going to be to dry run this. So I want to take a look at where everything goes and try to figure out where I need to mount it, especially with the side panels. All right, so the first thing I needed to do is determine how much slack I have and kind of where I have it, because there's things that kind of root off of this that go in certain directions. So hypothetically, if this was to be pulled relatively tight, I've got to make sure nothing's in the way with the back seat. When we look in the trunk, I can see it coming along this side right here. It'll go back behind the shock tower. There's a factory screw right here, which is where this harness went to. It was basically like zip tied there. I can do that. I can hold it up against that side. And then here's kind of where things start to split off and tie in. And there's all kinds of slack. There's a ton of slack. I've got plenty to work with here. It's not hair trigger as to where stuff goes, and then I just have those two things that plug in. So now that I've got that assessed, what I'll do is pull the wiring back out, clean it all, and then redo all the new Testa tape and get it all cleaned up. Okay, so that was about a half an hour of cleaning the wires. I did not take that kind of detailed video when I did the rest of the entire car, but it was 145 hours of that cleaning, soldering, retaping, and getting everything to be exactly the way it should be. So the next thing I'm going to do is go through and see what's going on with some, we'll call them modifications that were made. Things like this. Brown in this car is a ground. That appears to be aftermarket. Somebody may have done that. So I'll go in and check that. There's a few things like that. I don't know, you couldn't tell during the time lapse, but this had overspray on it from when the car was painted in the rear driver's side corner. The plug had overspray, so I used some reducer to get rid of that. Just clean it up. That's the kind of detail, again, that I go through. This thing goes into the basically the near wall area, and then goes to the underside of the car, the bumper area, and it looks like this might have been extended. But anytime I find something like this that looks factory-ish, I'll pull it apart and just check it all and make sure it's perfect. I found another somewhere in here. Yeah, there's a little kink in this wire. I want to make sure, see if that's exposed. If so, I'll resolder it, heat shrink, do all of that. And there was also this plug. Looks like it got hot or something at one point. It looks a little melted. It plugs in and holds, but I'll check my parts bin from my parts car, and I probably have another one of these. If so, I'll cut off the plug and solder and heat shrink a new one on. Okay, any repairs that needed to be made are complete. That's actually factory wiring. The factory does some really weird stuff in this car, but whatever. So at this point, I'm going to tape it all up. You will notice I'll time lapse this too. I'll use super glue at the ends of the tape, just to drop a super glue where it terminates, just to keep it from unraveling. And yeah, that's it. Oh, there was one thing too. I didn't have a replacement plug for this. I didn't have the right color harness, but I did have a plug. I don't have a Molex extraction pin tool, so I ordered one. I'll have that tomorrow, and I'll swap that plug out, which I can do after the wiring's all cleaned up. Here we are, and you can see why it took me 140 hours to rewire the whole car. That included a lot of splicing and all of that. So here's my main piece coming off. I've also kind of retaped some of this because I had to separate it when I went to pull this stuff apart. So there is my line. You can see exactly the same way the factory did it, with kind of the same kind of gap. They used a 9mm cloth tape as well. So it is factory restored, if you will. So now I'm going to dry run it through the trunk and then figure out how I'm going to mount it so that when I put the panels in and out, I don't disrupt the wiring. Okay, I'm starting on this end. This is the stuff that's going into the trunk arm. So that'll be, we'll do that a little bit later. And here's the new piece I just did. And I've got these zip ties that are, got basically a loop on them. I pushed it on there, I would have all I could do to get that off, and it's just a threaded stud. Same thing here. So basically the tension is holding it. It's extremely tight. That's not going to go anywhere. I'd probably have to take a panel popper to get it out. And then I took the factory rubber piece, put that back in place, dynamitted over everything. I've got a couple of spare holes should I need them. And that's it. So now I'll focus on the inside of the trunk. Okay, so that's where the wiring comes through the trunk with that rubber gasket. And then you can see I've got those adhesive zip tie clamps that I put in place. I got another one of these studs. This one I did put the nut on just to be safe. And I'll show you in just a second where I notched the shock tower cover. All right, and there's where I notched the shock tower cover. I knew I was going to do this from the beginning. I just wasn't sure where. Also notice that I ran the wiring in between these two kind of sections of bolts just to make sure that the wiring didn't rub against the backside, the nuts that are in there, just to make sure that there's no issue. So now I'll work on the side panel, and I'm going to continue running my wire here. Okay, quick update. Did this area as well. If you notice, this is a different style of bracket. For this, I used this style where it's basically screwed in with a stainless steel screw. I made sure there is actually like a double pocket in the car all the way along this backside, even along the backside of the bumper. So I was able to drill into there without any trouble. And these work much better when it's kind of a high stress area. Along there, it's fine because it's otherwise just kind of laying there. And I'll probably do these throughout the back wall here as well, the near wall. So coming along. Whew. All right, what I'm calling trunk OEM wiring is complete. So as you can see, again, I'll just give you an overall preview here. Notched the shock tower cover. I did put the side panel in to make sure everything fits properly and you don't see that hole. I also noticed I have the zebra wood floor in because I wanted to put the pull floor in and the near wall and make sure everything fit properly. I'll show you that as we go. So there again is the wiring. Very, very solid bracket, about every 5 to 6 inches. Even like right here, there's a bracket. Right here, there's a bracket. Just very overkill, but I want nothing to rattle or ever come loose. You can see this is where it branches off here. And then here it is along the near wall. I had to be careful here to put this down low to make sure that I have room because I'm doing a bunch of lighting in this back wall. And needed to make sure I wasn't going to hit. And then also needed to make sure that the near wall panel fit in here without getting pushed out, and it did. It just fit. So there's the OEM plug that goes out to the 2 marker lights on the bumper. But that's basically it. Very solid and done in an OEM way. There's even a bracket. See, you can't even see it. I put one back there and another one over here. Like, this stuff is not going to move. And again, there's no base in the trunk. So all the base is up front where it should be. So, all right, that is that part. On to the next part. Okay, actually, I just finished walking you through the wiring, the OEM wiring in the trunk. And I took a quick look at how much content I've got for this video. And despite my best efforts, I keep saying that, oh yeah, in this video, I'm going to do all this stuff. And it never turns out to be the case. But sorry to disappoint if you're disappointed, but I'm going to cut the video here. I have most of the day tomorrow, and which is Saturday and Sunday. I'll probably get in at least 16 to 20 hours between the 2 days, give or take. So I should be able to get all these loose ends wrapped up that I want. So in the next video, this is the factory wiring that goes into the trunk lid. This will all be kind of restored like I did with the trunk wires. We're also going to go in, and I've got the 2 wires I need to extend. Those are going to get wrapped up in there. The blue and white wires that go over to that trunk arm. And then there's that wiring I need to deal with. That's going to be pretty quick and easy. And then we got to do all the plugs, get the rest of the plugs on the trunk arm pieces. So still quite a bit to do, but I'm optimistic I can get the rest of what I want to get done in the next video and this weekend. So with that, I will thank you very much for watching. Again, if you made it this far, thank you very much. There will be more AMG content coming as well. I really want to do an intro video on this car to really kind of walk everybody through all the details, all the specifics. If you haven't seen this one, so we can do this with one hand. It's got a very cool engine bay that I customized. And the car is really clean. It's got a lot of, it doesn't have a lot done to it. It's got a really nice set of wheels. It's lowered. I did a full paint correction and a lot of mechanical work. So anyway, with that, there will be more content on the AMG stuff, but obviously more on CarMiZa as well. If you have not yet, please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks again. Bye-bye.